you've done some work at some of these strategies that are a little bit still obviously on the fringes, like the CBDs for potential concussion support.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through, what are some of the aspects of concussion that this might be helping and what the evidence tells us so far?
Yeah, but concussion is a huge one, isn't it? And I think it's something that if we're involved in contact sports, we have to be showing a huge interest in, both from a research, but also is there anything that can help? One thing I don't think we've probably mentioned enough from nutrition and concussion is that, we do see concussions mainly in the latter quarters of games, which suggests that there's maybe a fatigue element. And I think about my own playing time, but when you're getting shattered, you're just throwing your body anywhere, aren't you? And your probably technique goes out of the window. So I think one thing we can do is get our nutrition right to try and delay fatigue. And I still think our in-game fueling in most team sports isn't good enough, partly because of logistics. And I get a massive hang-up when I hear rugby commentators having a go at people bringing hydration and bringing nutrition onto the field and saying, we didn't need it in my day. Well, look, the game's faster. There's a lot of things going on. And actually, we need to do anything we can to help with concussion. So I almost feel like saying, wind your neck in. It's a hot day. The lads need a drink and a bit of nutrition. And if that stops one person getting a concussion, surely that's a good thing. So I think an awareness that being fully fueled can be a good thing during games. Then you're right, we need to start looking at what is out there. And there is some research in rodent models saying that CBD can actually potentially help prophylactically when it comes to concussion. And I'm all for prevention rather than cure. So getting the nutrition right so we're less fatigued is one thing, and that's a prevention rather than a cure. And if CBD can help to prevent it, then I think we need to look at it. The only problem, I need to really tag this onto any time I mention CBD in sport, is that at the moment, because of the current WADA regulations, I don't think we can recommend CBD to athletes. And even though CBD isn't prohibited by WADA, and they specifically name that is the only cannabinoid that isn't prohibited, it's nigh on impossible to give it in a manner that is on its own without any of the other cannabinoids in there. So we can't use it yet, but as a researcher, I'm really keen. And then we have got one or two things that may help should you get concussion, such as some of the omega-3s, omega-6, or fish oils that may have an effect. And creatine is another one that may have an effect with the blood-brain barrier. But I'm all for can we prevent rather than cure. So they're the two that I'm really interested in at the moment. And I just love WADA to clarify the stance on CBD a little bit better to allow us to look at it in a real world context.
Yeah, otherwise you sort of have to sit on the fence and not much can get done. And if we go back to the hydration part, Graeme, we get athletes in different contact sports who prefer water or prefer certain drinks, and it's challenging to get enough fuel in between because of the mouth feel or the gut feel or things like that. Do you have strategies or things that you go to in that sense when you have a player who just wants to drink only water and you know that they do need to have a little bit extra to have some support?
Well, I think this is where the sports gels come into their own. So, it was an early observation when I was working in rugby, and, I started off in rugby, and then when I retired, I kind of found it hard to watch for a few years. We're almost going into a bit of a mental health area, but I found that transition away from rugby difficult. So, it was a good few years where I didn't watch it very much. And then I came back to it as a consultant and really ignited my love for the game again. So it was an early observation in the dressing rooms that we were giving the bottles of sports drinks out, and some players would have a complete bottle and some would have literally a mouthful. And I get that because that's all based on thirst. Some people would be thirsty and would want it. Some people would have taken enough water in the first half that didn't want it. So I came up with the idea that maybe what we should be doing is just putting either water or electrolyte solutions into the bottle and actually getting our carbohydrate dose in gels, because it's an easier way to monitor it. Most people wouldn't have half a gel. They would have a full gel. So we know we've got 30 grams down them. and I'm trying to achieve about 60 grams an hour. So if I can get a gel into my players after the warm-up and then one at half time, I've achieved that 60 grams in the first hour. Then if I can try and get another one into them halfway through the second half, I'm somewhere near now that 60 grams an hour mark that I'm aiming at.
Yeah.
So that is my preferred strategy at the moment, to use water and to use electrolytes in the water bottles, but then to use gels to get my carbohydrate. But that does require an ability for the conditioning staff to get on the field and give these out. And, you know, that's why I do really get annoyed when I hear the commentators getting annoyed that people are coming on bringing water bottles and gels. You know, there's a big wider context here beyond getting messages on, which I'm sure that that's what we think this is all about. Yeah,
no, it is definitely frustrating to kind of hear those things. You hear it in some of the North American sports as well. But that's a great suggestion, you know, to be able to have that sort of fueling component with what's in the gels or other, you know, chews, or even, you know, NBA, CPB and J's have just a way to be able to get that in, because we definitely get different athletes that just want to have water. And then so that becomes because of the mouth feel or the gut feel. And now you're trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to support that athlete? Now, I'm interested to touch on that continuum between, you know, concussion and mental health and a lot of contact sports, because we see, again, in the NHL or the NFL, college football, you know, a lot of the collisions as you get on in years, not even too far down the road, we have challenges in mental health, and there's obviously greater awareness, which is great. We're picking up on things more, but, you know, from your lens and working in rugby, you know, how do you see that in terms of the support for mental health or the actual, you know, real needs of the players? Because obviously they're not just dealing with the pressure of the sport, but now with this whole living life and online and social media, there's that whole side of things for our young athletes, right?
Yeah. Do you know what? I'm glad I'm not a young athlete these days. If I'm being honest, you know, I think social media has done a lot of great stuff, but I also think it's done a hell of a lot of bad, and it must be so hard for an athlete to escape these days. I think if I was an athlete these days, I probably wouldn't be on social media. I'm sure the sponsors aren't happy about that, but I don't think I would from that side of things. But what I do think and what I've seen is a huge improvement over the last few years. So even on things like the concussion protocols that we're seeing in rugby now, that, you know, we're much better at getting people off the field if they suspect a head injury and getting them assessed. You know, I think about my playing days, and I remember being knocked out. Well, I don't remember. I remember being told about being knocked out twice in one game. So I got knocked out, came to the sideline, told the coach I thought I was good to go back on, went back on, and within 10 minutes I'd been knocked out a second time. And thankfully, things like that don't happen anymore. If someone's clearly been knocked out, well, they're off and that's it. And if someone's had a head injury and a head knock, and even they've not been knocked out, but somebody on the medical team or the referee even thinks that was a heavy contact, they're off for an assessment. And if they fail their assessment, regardless of what the player wants, because the player always wants to be on the field, don't they?
Yeah.
They're off for their own protection. And then we've got a really good graduated return to play protocol and everything like that going on. So I think we're a lot better at handling the head contacts.